far-fetched beliefs have faded away. This has allowed for much more convincing and relatively reasonable explanations to emerge, and those who are still committed to recovering the plane and giving closure to the relatives and friends of those on board are still hard at work. One popular theory, and perhaps the most reasonable based on what we know so far, is that one of the pilots took command of the aircraft, shut off all lines of communication, and managed to stay in charge during the whole trip without any interference from the other pilots, passengers, or flight attendants. Consider the evidence for this theory and the steps that would have helped this person achieve their goals. Most people believe Captain Zahari shut his first officer out of the cockpit and disabled the plane's identification systems. He put on an oxygen mask and depressurized the jet at 35,000 feet, killing himself and everyone else on board. If this scenario is correct, the pilot made a course correction so that the plane would fly along the borders of Malaysia and Thailand, avoiding any potential military bases that might have responded to an unidentified aircraft. Once the plane reached the ocean, it was flown in a southwesterly direction and disappeared into the depths of the sea. The question is why First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid or Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah would act in such a way. Many people think they are trying to kill themselves in a way that would kill many other people too. Occam's razor, which asserts that the simplest explanation with the fewest possible variables is usually the correct one, would suggest that either Zahari or Fariq took control of the jet and piloted it into the Indian Ocean as the most plausible scenario. This is because it explains the facts and figures without introducing any new ones. Yet when looking at the personalities of both individuals, this explanation falls short. There was no known history of apathy, anxiety, or irritability, according to Captain Zahari's official papers. What could have motivated him if there were no major life changes, interpersonal conflicts, or familial stresses? Although mental health and depression are complex, investigators found that First Officer Fariq's ability and professional approach to work was reported to be good. It's not unheard of for a pilot to intentionally crash his jet as a means of ending his own life. Co-pilot Andreas Lubitz deliberately crashed Germanwings Flight 9525 from Barcelona to Dusseldorf on March 24, 2015, killing all 150 passengers on board. But in this case, the pilot had been exhibiting symptoms of mental disturbance and was found unfit for duty. There was no indication that either of the pilots on Flight 370 was mentally unwell, and both had received clean bills of health. However, there is some evidence that Captain Zahari had practiced flying the plane into the Indian Ocean on his home flight simulator. However, this is speculative at best and may have been a mere coincidence. Several hijacking theories could explain the strange events preceding Flight 370's disappearance, including but not limited to one of the pilots seizing control and crashing the plane, but this theory has been ruled out. What is almost certainly true, however, is that someone in control of Flight 370 shut off its communication systems and manually changed the plane's course throughout the morning of March 8, 2014. It's possible that one or both of the pilots made the decision to take the plane hostage. There are obvious gaps in this argument, including the fact that one contacted flight control or hired Malaysia Airlines to demand a ransom before attempting a landing. The probe also found that neither pilot was experiencing financial difficulties or exhibiting any unusual behavior. The investigators listened to the pilots' conversations and found no evidence of anxiety or stress. Another finding was that it is not possible to deactivate automatic deployment of the masks from the cockpit, suggesting that the passengers and crew had plenty of time to try to retake control of the plane if it had been hijacked. However, the evidence does not suggest that there was any sort of conflict, possible indication of a distinct kind of hijacking. Someone other than the pilots may have taken control of Flight 370 and caused its disappearance. Flight 370 had 227 passengers and 10 crew members. One of them might have been able to hijack the jet. It's hard to see it happening, given all the security measures and procedures that have been added to large airplanes after September 11th, including the internally locking cockpit door. And then there would have been hundreds more passengers they had to find a way to control. There were rumors that 2 Iranian men on Flight 370 were terrorists, since they were using stolen Italian and Australian passports. However, investigators eventually concluded that the individuals were illegal migrants. The flight attendants could have done it, but again, it seems unlikely given that they were all married with families and lacked the technical competence to disable the plane's communication systems before taking control. This suggests a more outlandish hijacking idea, but one that would account for Flight 370's bizarre course. One or more stowaways may have been on board the plane, according to some speculation. It has been said that a hiding place is immediately outside the cockpit door on the floor. This would necessitate the offender boarding the plane before the crew did and staying hidden until takeoff. Interestingly, the transponder could have been disabled from this position, which we know actually occurred. Maybe some employee with a grievance towards Malaysia Airlines intended to hold the jet for ransom, or cause mayhem for no other reason than to see the airline fail. However, the same problems appear in the case where one of the pilots hijacks the plane for ransom. But what if there were more than one stowaway on board, or if one of them was highly armed? Is it possible that this is all part of a far darker and more elaborate plot? Terrorists hijacking Flight 370 is widely rejected because no group has ever claimed responsibility for the incident. What if, however, the hijacking of Flight 370 was a deliberate attempt to mislead the public? At the same time as Russia was occupying Crimea, Flight 370 vanished. At the time, many powerful countries threatened sanctions and other actions against Russia in response to Putin's decision to take Crimea from Ukraine. The public's fury over Russia's annexation of Crimea, however, subsided somewhat as news of the strange disappearance of Flight 370 came. The search for the missing plane was suddenly the subject of non-stop news coverage, with aviation experts rather than military specialists being interviewed. Some have speculated that a secret mission was conducted out to capture Flight 370 and construct a story that would distract the rest of the world from what was happening in Crimea at the time. This might have been done by Russian operatives or hired mercenaries. Some have even hypothesized that the plane's SATCOM was tampered with, diverting it from its original course across the Indian Ocean to a landing spot in Kazakhstan. Those who believe this say it's likely the jet isn't in the Indian Ocean because it's never been found there. But let's get one thing straight. The world's oceans are enormous. Approximately 80% of the ocean has never been surveyed by humans. If we ignore the most outlandish speculation and focus on the facts as they stand in 2023, it is most likely that one of the pilots of Flight 370 took control of the plane and flew it into the Indian Ocean, where it broke apart and fell to the depths of the sea. It would be like looking for a needle in a haystack to locate the plane's fuselage. What happened on board Flight 370 will remain a mystery until additional proof or more concrete information becomes available. Many people feel that individuals who have lost loved ones in the tragedy would benefit from the hunt for the plane's wreckage continuing. Only a handful of scholars have made it their life's work to uncover the truth about Flight 370, and as of right now, no one is actively searching for the missing Boeing 777.